Excellent, Bob. Have a seat. All right, so check this pile out. I mean, it's impressive, isn't it? It's quite something. All right, I'm going to start with a learning style observation. There's the polite NAMI question, and then the related hard driving NAMI question. Dr. Heinsohn, which state isn't doing first episode of psychosis? Is the polite question. The other question is, what's wrong in Arkansas, and how can we fix it? Is it, in fact, Arkansas? And how can NAMI Arkansas and NAMI fix it?
The slides are available, so you can see for yourself who the outlier is. But I would want to say, so this question about what can NAMI do to help fix it, I want to recognize that NAMI has done a lot to create that momentum that's there. Not just national NAMI, but local NAMI chapters have gone to their, when this mental health block grant opportunity came out, NAMI members were downloading the information about coordinated specialty care from the NIMH website. They were going to their mental health authority, and in some cases saying, did you know that you've gotten additional money and you're required to spend it on first episode psychosis? Frequently the answer was, no, I did not know that. And then the second question was, did you know that there are guidelines for how this should be implemented? And here they are from NIMH publications. So on the ground, local chapters created that kind of pressure that created the change. So what you can do is you can become educated about the strategy and the outcomes associated with the strategy, and you can go to your leaders and say, why are we not doing this? This is the standard of care. Why is my state, my county, my clinic not offering this? And to be honest with you, sometimes they're going to be very legitimate answers. And the answer is we don't have any money. Even with that mental health block grant money, we don't get enough money to do it. Well, then that's another conversation about how you address that need. But in cases where it's a matter of preference, then you can ask, well, how do you justify that against the evidence that is available?
Okay, there's about 6 questions on the use of clozapine in early intervention. What's the proper place for it? I'll make a statement which is not in the question. We have a very strong feeling that clozapine is underutilized. There's no other treatment, there's no other condition where the best treatment is rarely employed. And so how do you think about clozapine in the context of early intervention? I appreciate that lower medications are part of the philosophy and research of it, but there's 5 or 6 questions that are about clozapine earlier in the course of a person's life.
So there are researchers who are very interested in this question and asking in particular, why would you need to wait to fail 2 or 3 trials of antipsychotic medications before clozapine is an option? And have been conducting research to show, well, what is the difference in outcome if you switch early after like maybe 1 first-line medication doesn't work versus waiting 2 or 3. I think the evidence is accumulating in a way that physicians will be able to have more informed conversations with people about the pros and cons of the approach, because the pros are very often clozapine will achieve symptomatic reductions that other medicines do not achieve, but there is a side effect burden. So this is a conversation with people about how you weigh the relative benefits and risks of that approach. So I guess what I'm saying is to try to not be mealy-mouthed about this. We don't have enough data to make a definitive statement that this is the way that it should go, but we are funding the research that is helping generate the data that people can use to make informed decisions about what they want to do in the event that the first-line medications that are recommended for first episode psychosis don't have the intended efficacy effect.
I have over 100 questions here. This begins to look like my desk in the morning. It looks like a series of index cards have fallen from an airplane in front of me.
I do have to say that I have to catch the red eye tonight at 11:35.
Yes.
So I do have limited time.
How do I find a clinic in my state? The related question, how do I advocate, parens in Arkansas or not, to activate more services in rural areas? So this is 10 pieces of index cards. I'm now giving you a two-part question. NAMI has these programs listed on our website, correct? Correct?
Well, I can tell you,
Yes, I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I didn't put it together, but it has been true. And how would a person find out about this in their state?
So SAMHSA has a resource called the Early Treatment Locator, Early Serious Mental Illness Treatment Locator. And you can go there and you can type in the state, and it lists all of the states, all of the sites within the state that categorize themselves as offering early treatment. In looking at that list a few times, I've sometimes questioned whether every clinic that's included in that is offering coordinated specialty care. So I think what you need to do is you identify the ones that are geographically closest to you, and then you go to them with the information that you can get from NIMH or from NASHPID about what constitutes coordinated specialty care, and you can ask the question, so does your clinic offer pharmacotherapy that's adjusted to the needs of a younger population? Is the psychotherapy a cognitive and behavioral psychotherapy that's organized around principles of resilience and recovery of functioning? Do you offer supported employment and education? To what extent are family members involved in developing the treatment plan and being a resource to the person going forward? What's your crisis intervention stance and your assertive outreach into the community? You can ask those questions, and judging on the answers, you can make your decision about whether this is a program that meets the need. To ask the question, what can you do to create change? Again, I think if you're asking questions like that and you're not getting the answers that you like, I think that becomes the start of a conversation to say, explain to me why this is not being offered. What are the obstacles that prevent you from offering this? And then it becomes a conversation about what may be done to surmount those obstacles.
And talk to people in NAMI. And this is one of the greatest accomplishments in NAMI history, in my experience. Research was done, we fought for money, clinics are now populating America, right? So talk to other people in other states at this convention. This is doable because we have seen it happen. I have a half a dozen questions on marijuana and use of marijuana, research on marijuana, and the notation that this program did not help with substance use. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that problem in the early psychosis space.
So,
can you fix that, Bob?
Apparently not. Or we're going to have a steeper hill to climb. I think individuals who are experiencing these kinds of problems, it seems like the wisest course is to not add outside substances into the system. So that includes any kind of recreational drug, marijuana included, and also alcohol. That would be the recommendation, that the recovery of your brain and its normal functioning really would do best in a state where you didn't have these extra agents being introduced. We know from the research, there's still some questions about whether excessive cannabis use causes psychosis. It seems like excessive cannabis use in people who are most vulnerable will accelerate the development of psychotic symptoms. If you don't have certain risk factors, it's not certain whether excessive use would actually cause psychosis. But since we can't, on an individual level, it's very difficult to predict who has the risk factors. The general statement would be it's better to stay away from the stuff. So,
So a related question would be, is NIMH doing research into these questions?
Well, we're certainly, we don't have specific research initiatives around it, but within our investigator-initiated program, we encourage people to do research that takes on these questions. And we actually think within EpiNet, I can tell you, within the 8 states that will be involved in EpiNet, we already know that they vary in terms of their marijuana laws, from some that don't allow marijuana use at all, to those who have it just for medical purposes, to those who have more liberal recreational use. And it will be a way to generate pretty quickly data that will tell us whether that availability complicates the course of first episode psychosis treatment.
I have a half a dozen questions on my family member, my son, my daughter, has been sick for more than 5 years, more than 10 years, more than 20 years. How does this public health early intervention approach relate to my child's life?
Yeah. So, you know, we've picked early intervention because the science tells us that developmental window is a really ripe time for intervening. And we put a lot of effort into seeing whether we can use that developmental window as an ally in changing the course of illness. But if you're outside of that developmental window, it doesn't mean that there's no cause for hope or that we shouldn't be doing things. So one thing that I will mention, a commonality between coordinated specialty care and assertive community treatment is that they're both team-based. They both recognize that there are multiple areas of need. They both have an assertive posture to be able to tailor interventions to people and get them help. And in that team-based approach, there's a shared responsibility for maintaining the person's health and recovery over time. Currently, ACT teams are mostly reserved for people who have the longest period of illness and may be more resistant to treatment. Then we have coordinated specialty care that's offered to people in the earliest stage of treatment. Why wouldn't a team-based intervention that tailors interventions around the person's need work in that middle period? That hasn't been really advocated very forcefully yet, but I think that it's logical to assume that way of organizing treatment would be of great assistance. Might not be curative, but it would be of great assistance to people in those middle years of illness. We do have some studies that are looking at that kind of organization of care and what impact it has on the middle course.
Bob, what about people with bipolar disorder? Early on in the course of their illness. So this is, you know, I have about 3 cards on this question.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. Gets asked a lot. You know, shockingly, we don't know that much about treatment for first episode bipolar illness. Most of the research activity historically has been on preventing schizophrenia. So one could say, well, we need a RAISE-like trial for first episode bipolar disorder. And but you know, that probably would require a new appropriation and about the same amount of time as RAISE. But there is an alternative. So within EpiNet, within these 55 clinics, we know that they vary in terms of their inclusion and exclusion criteria. There's a good number of them. About 20% of them actually enroll people who have either a schizophrenia-like first episode psychosis or a bipolar type of disorder. The power of EpiNet is, while every clinic will have a handful of people with bipolar illness, if you aggregate those people across the network, you'll have several hundred people that have first episode bipolar illness that are being treated within coordinated specialty care programs. We can consider them a cohort, match them to a group of people that have a schizophrenia-like first episode psychosis, and in a very short period of time, based on all of our understanding about how schizophrenia-like FEP responds to coordinated specialty care, we'll be able to make a pretty rapid response to, is coordinated specialty care effective for bipolar illness? My prediction is that it will be at least as effective, and if I had to put money down, I would say it's going to be more effective for people with bipolar illness. But that is we already know that is going to be a research project that will be launched on the National EpiNet platform. We will have information to answer that question within a couple of years.
Great. We'll have you back. 3 or 4 questions. What happens after I'm in this amazing program and I get turned into treatment as usual, which is perceived as inadequate? I think I'm on safe ground there.
Yeah. So this is an active area of investigation worldwide, and some of the early reports have been that people do very well in the first 2 years of this treatment. When they return to the usual care system, by 5 years, those gains disappear, and they're not doing much better than people who never entered specialty care. Based on that finding, there have been a couple of programs that have been experimenting with what happens after that initial intensive period of care. What different approaches will not only preserve the gains, but actually will help consolidate them and continue the person's recovery. So up in Montreal, Ashok Malla has conducted a study where they've looked at 2 different types of stepped-down approaches after initial care. And they found that over a 5-year period, a step-down program which keeps many elements of coordinated specialty care, but begins to release the person from ones where they made the most accomplishment, but still maintains that relationship and that treatment philosophy, actually appears very promising for maintaining those gains over a longer period of time and actually continuing to promote recovery. This is another question that we see that EpiNet is going to be able to answer or address, at least in the US context. So the shorter answer is the science is not definitive yet, but the trials are being conducted, and the early finding is that you need to continue this kind of model of care in a step-down fashion after the initial 2-year of treatment.
I have 3 or 4 questions on kind of the disparities rural access problem. How much of this, and this is not a question, this is my interpretation of the question, because rural mental health, one of the major solutions in the VA and in the public health service is telehealth.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have such a program in Little Rock, Arkansas, which I'm sure is going to be a NAMI endeavor. But you live 150 miles from Little Rock, Arkansas, and you can't get to coordinated specialty care. Is telehealth part of this, and is access to the rural population part of the vision?
Yeah.
That's my twist on these 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah, no, I think, so most of the programs have been launched in urban areas, just because the population density is such that there's enough people to come to make it feasible to operate a program. But, there are large areas of the United States that are not densely populated, and there are people who experience severe mental illness in those areas. So there are some ongoing tests about whether coordinated specialty care can be delivered in a telehealth context, and some of those early pilot projects are they're very exciting to say that in fact many of these procedures can be adapted. People accept the telehealth format as a way of receiving the services. The Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, Eric Hagan, has launched an initiative called Patient Empowerment Technology. And it's looking at how both digital health and communications technology can be used to increase a person's, not only their access to treatment, but their sense of agency within the treatment. And as we presented to him our agency priority goal around early serious mental illness and developing these programs, he immediately saw the connection between coordinated specialty care, rural centers, and this patient Empowerment Technology Initiative, and we're working very aggressively with the department, the Secretary's office, to move that forward so that technology could be applied to coordinated specialty care in a way that we address that urban-rural divide.
There's 3 or 4 questions on money. And I'm going to ask a question based on my volunteering at a first episode of Psychosis Clinic in Boston. Clinics don't know how to bill insurance. And so they bill for the doctor's time and the therapist's time. And then all the work that's helping people, community, vocational, supported education, is all picked up by the clinic. So it's a money loser for the state. Are you working with the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to develop, for instance, a one billable code for 6 months of care, which would put this whole thing on a foundation, right? Because obviously with the great American healthcare experiment, people are on their parents' insurance till age 26. Many of these people have private insurance. There's 3 questions about Medicaid, and I know in our system, people fall to Medicaid when they have this vulnerability, but not only Medicaid. So I'm interested in that question because you mentioned CMS on the board. If there was a financial way to bill for this thing, it could be sustained even if the next administration took all the money away, right? And so just saying. So that's my editorial on these questions. But there's 4 questions on money. That's just my spin on the question, and that's the prerogative of the moderator.
I reiterate, the views that I express are my own and do not necessarily reflect the official views of the federal government. So let me say this. When CMS issued that information bulletin about how Medicaid programs could apply for waivers to cover coordinated specialty care services, and particularly those ones that aren't typically reimbursed by insurance or Medicaid. So the supported employment, case management, team meetings,
all the
outreach,
stuff.
all of that stuff. So CMS sent that to state Medicaid directors, giving them permission to be able to make those adjustments. In several states, they've taken that license as permission to begin experimenting with ways that they could do this kind of bundled payment scheme for first episode psychosis. So there are very active discussions in the state of Maine, in Connecticut, I know in New York as well, where the state mental health authority, the Medicaid directors are working on this on a state-by-state basis. To be honest with you, this is kind of like outside of my area of expertise to know how this would.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to follow up with the person who is their expert. And I say that, we love you, Bob Heinsohn.
Yeah.
I mean, we straight up love you, right? You're winning our biggest award tonight. We love you, Bob Heinsohn. But I think NAMI recognizes that unless there's a financial commitment that is workable and easy translatable, so you have Anthem Insurance or United Insurance, your child develops this problem, if there isn't a billable code, you're at the whim of progressive commissioners of mental health who are under constant fire, and soon there will be a recession and money will be removed from our system.
Yeah.
We've seen this before. So this is an off-camera project that we can work on with you, and Bob will connect us to the right people. But I think the NAMI membership has seen this before, where a great idea doesn't have the financial foundation on concrete, and if it's built on sand. I'm not saying this is built on sand. This is one of the greatest accomplishments collaboratively between NIMH and NAMI in history. I'm just saying we want it also to be on concrete.
Sure.
Okay? All right, so good. Now,
just a comment to say one of the reasons I love coming to this meeting, it's like coming home for me, literally like to my family. Robbie, really good. Now what are you going to do for us next?
Yeah, Bob. We love you, Bob. And Bob, can you get back to me by 11 a.m. on the financial resource question? Because I'm a busy man. Right, so okay. Well, it's just the nature of your leadership job at the top of NIMH, right? Like, and we're your team, right? And I would like to submit that slope.
Again, let me just say, I am the faithful servant of the NIMH director,
No, that's
Joshua
right.
Gordon.
Dr. Gordon, we switched the time on this. Dr. Gordon wanted to be here. He had planned a family vacation, but we moved the convention around. Bob is.
He would have been here.
He would have been here, and we wanted Bob here because of our strategic plan, early intervention, to give you an update on the work we collectively have accomplished. So it all worked out pretty well. We'll tell Josh Gordon about the convention date as soon as we know them. Maybe someone knows them, not me, and we'll get him to commit. But his summer vacation was organized around last year's schedule. So anyway, so boy, a lot of questions. Boy, there's so many questions. And now I'm into the one-offs. So I've answered all the multiple questions. So the Jeopardy questions for 1,000, I've answered them. Now I'm going with things that aren't related to this field for 100. What is NIMH doing about kind of menopause, hormonal changes? This is the grab bag category on Jeopardy. So we're now out of your zone, duly noted. Menopause, estrogen, mental health vulnerabilities, mood disorders. Who would we follow up with if not you? We know you can't know everything.
So there is a geriatric research program within the Division of Translational Research at NIMH.
What? You didn't like the word.
Look,
Are you speaking for yourself or for the federal government, Bob?
I'm good at a very narrow set of things. There's a reason why I am not the NIMH director, and also why I'm not a politician. So there's a research program that looks at the needs of maturing Americans.
Nice. Okay, it's good.
And Jovier Evans is actually the branch chief for that program, and he may know of research that.
So say the name slower. Joe?
Jovier Evans.
Jovier Evans.
He's the branch chief.
Okay. I'm going to stay with the not in first episode of Psychosis grab bag for 100, Bob. This is not your favorite category, right? Let's just talk about ketamine and esketamine. I know a lot of research has been done. Esketamine is approved by the FDA. Are you doing more research on ketamine at NIMH broadly? Or have you considered that ketamine is an innovation and it's now been marketed by a company as esketamine, and NIMH is setting that down and moving on to other questions?
Well, you may be aware that the NIMH intramural research program really did some of the seminal work around ketamine and its value for treatment-resistant depression that led to the pathway for esketamine to be developed and then to be approved by the FDA. That program has moved on from treatment-resistant depression, whether ketamine or a ketamine-like substance can be used as an acute treatment for acute suicidality. And under what conditions would it achieve rapid relief for people who are acutely suicidal, and then how could that be offered in a form that would be practical in emergency situations. So within our intramural research program, Carlos Zarate is the leader of that program. That continues to be an area of active research. For us, on the extramural side, this is an odd situation where practice, the use of ketamine for treatment-resistant depression has kind of outpaced the science and is becoming so widely available that, like, the normally, we would go from efficacy trials to larger scale comparative effectiveness trials, and then it would be broadly introduced. The unmet need and the desire for innovative treatments has fueled an expansion of these services where, so we have not had further research around testing esketamine for treatment of treatment-resistant depression. It may be that when variations in outcome become apparent, that maybe research to be able to predict who is likely versus not likely to respond would be something that we would consider, but that hasn't been proposed yet.
One question about advancing discovery. So we've been working together on this idea of reigniting pharma to work to develop treatments that help people with fewer side effects, right? And because we've faced these biological limitations and market force problems, many companies have exited. Can you describe a little bit the proposal that NIMH put together? Because it ties into early psychosis work. This has been a beautiful collaboration between NIMH and NAMI and the Broad Institute. I want to emphasize that. But I just wanted to get your take on how the proposal fits into EpiNet, right? Because this proposal to drive new treatments, and pharma companies put up money and FNIH puts up money, it's looking at early psychosis, risk patterns, that sort of thing. How do you think about the advancing discovery progress fitting into the EpiNet vision? And that's the last question, and this is in your wheelhouse.
Yes.
So we're out of grab bag for 100, okay?
So if I screw this one up, it's all on me.
Exactly.
I think, so our first vision for EpiNet was that it would be a platform not only for improving the quality of care, but then a platform for more health services research, unanswered questions about the way that services are configured, and that answering those questions would reach back to improve care. But we did think that this could be a platform for translational research, future translational research. And a way that could occur would be if we had, in this National Data Coordinating Center, if there was a way that translational researchers could look into the anonymous database to look at some of these data that might be relevant to some of the hypotheses that are of cutting edge interest. So within early psychosis, in terms of like new medication development, there are two areas that, hypotheses that look like they're very promising. One is around glutamate functioning in the brain. The way that the inhibitory and excitatory neurons work together to regulate behavior is mostly regulated by glutamate. And there have been some thoughts that maybe some experiments that look at ways that we might be able to modulate that glutamate signal would be maybe the pathway for a novel set of pharmacotherapeutics that could address psychosis. The other hypothesis is that, for quite a while we've known that psychosis emerges in the context of illness at in the synapse, or that the health of cells is affected so that the number of synapses begins to decrease, and there are things that drive that. There are pathways that drive the number and the extent of these synaptic connections. And so looking like that would be another target, a novel target to regulate synaptic retreat and regrowth would be another area. So we again could offer to people the opportunity to participate in these translational research studies. And how would we do that? Well, we would do it that the translational researchers would be able to look in this anonymous database. If they see sets of people, anonymous people, that they think would be candidates for their study, there would be a mechanism where they could send a message to the National Data Coordinating Center, who would know the clinical site that person came from. They would send that message to the clinical site, and the clinician would be able to propose to the individual or ask them whether they would be interested in being contacted for such a study. And that way we have kind of a firewall between the scientist and the person receiving services. But if the person says yes, we would be able to connect them and they would
Got
be
it.
able to enroll in those studies.
Okay,
So that's kind of so translational research is definitely on the horizon.
that's progress. Please give your warmest thank you to Dr. Robert Henkin. Thank you, Bob. Take care.
Thank you.